All right, testing, testing. Looks like we got some kind of action on there. Oh, all right. So, welcome in.
Howdy.
Yes.
So, as I mentioned earlier, my name is Taylor Goodwin, or Dr. Goodwin. I am a naturopathic doctor. A lot of people try to pronounce that neuropath, which is totally cool, but naturopath is slightly different. And naturopaths go through medical school, or at least naturopathic doctors go through medical school, and then, in my case, chose to specialize in alternative medicine. So that means that we have some special tools in our toolkit. We are trained on pharmaceuticals, but we're also trained on diet much more deeply, lifestyle much more deeply, supplements, and also acupuncture, hydrotherapy, and then my personal favorite, and what we're going to be talking about today, herbs. So, since I was a kid, something like 9, I think, my mom made the mistake of giving me my first herb book. And it was by something super scientific, like Reader's Digest, you know. And I started paging through it, and I came across Achillea millefolium, which is yarrow. We've got one right over here. And it talked about how yarrow could be used, and it was used by the mythical warrior Achilles when his soldiers started getting struck down and were losing blood, and they were all dying because of blood loss. He would go through the battle and put yarrow over the wounds to staunch the bleeding. And I was just, as a kid, that was just amazing. So I was hooked after that. And then not long after that, I started hearing, Taylor, stop harvesting in the neighbor's yard. And it was great. I think we've matured since then. Now my wife calls me back from the neighbor's yard. So, but herbs have a fantastic breadth and depth of natural health properties that we utilize for thousands of years, and they've kind of been forgotten in our country in recent years. And I don't think they're an additive. I think they're part of our baseline health, is to have proper eating and nutrition. And that includes herbs that have compounds that might not be listed as vitamin A, which is also important. For example, proanthocyanins, very few people get enough of those. And those are found in dark-colored berries and dark-colored vegetables. And those are really good for cardiovascular health, which is one of the top 5 killers or issues in the country. And so we have a number of things to gain by understanding the plants around us. So in this kind of seminar, I'm going to break up what we talk about into 3 sections. Section 1, safety. I'm going to talk about how to identify plants, and so I also want to make sure that you guys know how to do that safely, because anytime a small mistake can have big consequences, there's a reason to talk a little bit about how to do it safely. So, to underscore that, there have been mistakes made, but it's easy to avoid those mistakes if you know what you're doing. But there was a park ranger who was not very careful, and he didn't have enough lettuce on his sandwich. So he grabbed a random leaf and he put it on his sandwich. And I hope it tasted good, because that was the last sandwich that he had. So you need to be a little careful. Don't just randomly do it. But once you know what to look for, you can do it safely. And people have done that for thousands of years safely. And not all plants are quite as unforgiving as the one he pulled. That was poison hemlock. That one's not very forgiving. So we'll do safety first. Then we're going to go over 3 plants that grow natively here in the Ozarks. And they're all over. It's great. And some of them are quite delicious. This one's actually one of my favorite flavors, just period. Not like just natural flavors, just flavors, period. I have a sister-in-law who's always asking me for more of this, and so I can never give it out in the clinic because it's always gone. And then section 3, we'll talk about some events and education things. The only one I'll mention right now is that this is a monthly event. I have new plants every month. I'm also looking at maybe adding in, feedback welcome, adding in just more health rather than plant-centric discussions. But on the 2nd Wednesday of every month at 5:30, we have new plants, and we'll be happy to see you back. So with that, we'll crack into section 1, a little bit about safety. There was a handout next to the, on the front table there. And the handout has a number of things about safety on there. I'll go over them in a quick story here. So, I was partway through medical school, and I was all the way through with being at medical school, because that's a lot of work. I was really done. I was fried. And then I was looking at the curriculum choices you can make, and there usually aren't very many choices that you can make because it's all locked in after you do your specializations and things. But there was a couple choices, and I saw one of them said trip to Colorado, Vail, and Sedona. Or not Sedona, that's in Arizona, but in the Vail area. Gorgeous, Rocky Mountains, herbs. Spend a week learning herbs outside of Arizona, outside of medical school. And I was like, sign me up, I don't care how much it costs. Irresponsibility is my name. Boom. Went out, it was gorgeous, it was amazing. If you ever have a chance to go through the Vail, Golden, that kind of an area, Lyons, gorgeous in Colorado, absolutely gorgeous. But we were up there and we were in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains identifying plants. On the last day, we went up higher into the Rocky Mountains as the herbalist led us, looking for a specific plant called Osha, or Liguscum porteri. That is a very special plant, very sacred to the Native Americans, and very useful as well. And so we went up and we were looking for it, and we arrived, and she said, oh dear, this happens sometimes. All the Osha there would have been a stand there that she would always go and visit, was gone. And that was a little unfortunate. So she said, all right, this happens sometimes. Shoo, shoo, little ducklings, go and identify wild arnica and wild violet and see if you can tell the difference between a triangle leaf and a heart-shaped leaf. So we went off and argued geometry for half an hour. Eventually she found one, and as we were all herded back by one of the students who was the runner, one of the students said something interesting. It said, when we're looking at Osha, Professor so-and-so is going to tell us how to tell it apart from something else. It's really cool and it's really important. Just wait for it. We all went over there. She starts telling us about Osha, about how it's a sacred plant to the Native Americans, both because of how useful it is, also because they've seen animals use it as medicine, which actually has been recorded as well. It's called bear plant. In zoos, a zookeeper took a root, she told us this, and tossed the root in. And Pop Bear came over and picked up the root and he started going at it really excited, and then he froze. And then he took it over to Mama Bear and made present to Mama Bear of the root. Mama Bear hadn't been moving very well, arthritis. And she chewed it up, lathered it, put it onto her fur, and then rubbed it deep into her fur. And that was a subject of a scientific paper of like, they actually are doing this on purpose. This means they have this level of intelligence, another tool using it. They were very excited about that. I'm excited about the fact. Next day, Mama Bear was moving better. Arthritis had decreased in pain. Also, Mama Bear and Papa Bear had been fighting, and they finally got along because that present was a good move by Papa Bear. So the zookeeper was like moved to tears. They're finally getting along again. It was great. But I went and found the video. Actually, no, someone actually finally sent it to me after I'd lost it because it's been a number of years. But anyway, very cool. And then our professor, going back into the story of the professor there, she told us all these things, and then she said, and told us a number of other things. That's Osha. She didn't mention something. So the student who was excited about the identification thing rose their hand and said, excuse me, could you tell us how do I tell it apart from poison hemlock? And she's like, oh, I'm glad you reminded me. By the smell. They're that similar. I tell this story for 3 reasons. Number 1, because the bear story is pretty cool. I like that story. But 3 other reasons. When teaching, especially in presentation mode, but even in books, people make mistakes. So you always want to have 2 sources before you go and eat something in the wild, so that if someone forgot something, you have a backup to make sure you know what's going on. So do a little bit of homework, okay? I have come across multiple times from other professionals and myself and books. Don't use Wikipedia, please. That doesn't even count as a source. Where something has been missed that's important. But if you have 2 that are both respectable sources, then you tend to be pretty good. So that's number 1. Number 2, some plants are dangerous. Poison hemlock is, spoiler, poisonous. So Osha and poison hemlock, you need to be sure of your identification. So you have multiple sources so you know how, and then don't be like, oh, the leaf looks right, the flower's kind of funky, I guess that's close enough. Please be sure, okay? And then the last safety tip, this is kind of a cool fact, 70 to 90% of pharmaceutical medications originally come from plants. And so it makes sense that plants and medications can interact and kind of build on each other. So if you're on medications, there are some plants, there are lots of plants that you're actually safe with to go ahead and mix, but some of them not so much. Some of them make your liver not chew up the medications as fast, and so then you get a whole bunch of them in your blood, and your dose effectively goes up. And so you need to be aware before you start medicinal grade plants or a lot of a new plant that you need to know that that's safe. So, last tip off to the side, those are the 3 tips for us. Last tip is not for us, it's for the plants. OSHA, in my little story there, was missing. And in fact, it had just come out of being endangered. And it was no longer endangered. And it actually had come back enough that it was responsible for us to harvest 1. There were 30 medical students. All of us together, we only harvested 1. So we had the experience and we knew what it was, and that was responsible, but we wanted it to keep coming back. In this area, that was in Colorado, in this area, there are some plants that are that endangered, or more endangered than that actually, where you wouldn't harvest any. Golden seal is in that kind of an area. I don't teach golden seal very much. I've had people ask me to. It's a cool plant. I don't want people harvesting it, so I'm not trying to get people all excited about it. Number 2, American ginseng. That one's even further gone. That one I'm hoping comes back at all. Echinacea, in some areas, I know we see it driving on the roadside. It's gorgeous. In some areas, it's endangered, and we don't want it to become so here. I haven't looked to see if it's technically endangered here, or if this is an area where you can do more. So that one we might be okay, we might not. Need to check. So, to keep the plants happy, if they're common, harvest up to half. If they're uncommon, harvest up to 1/3, and usually try to stick to the leaves and things like that. So you're just taking 1/3 of the plant. The roots and the flowers are fine. You can take some roots and flowers if you need them. If they're endangered or on the edge of endangered, take nothing but photographs, leave nothing but footprints, please. So, and that will help them come back so that we can once again enjoy them. Some of these have been used by Native Americans and other cultures, but Native Americans, given the continent we're on most prominently, for thousands of years, very effectively. And when they go away, that medicine or other use can completely disappear. Sometimes there is a compound that is nowhere else in the world except in one plant species. Ginkgo is an example of that. So, and ginkgo is the last surviving member of its species, genus, and family, if I recall correctly. Maybe not family, but certainly genus. So, those are the safety tips. Riveting and exciting. I know you're all a quiver now. Any questions on those?
Did you say echinacea? Or what was that?
Echinacea.
Echinacea?
Mm-hmm.
What
So
color
that's
is- what
also
color
known
is
as purple coneflower.
That's, okay.
There you
That's why it sounded familiar, yeah.
Yeah, they were really excited about it in research for a long time where they were arguing back and forth. It's great for immunity. It doesn't do anything. Depends on which part of the plant you test. That's why they were confused. The top part helps immunity. The bottom part turns immunity down. So I use one for one thing and the other for the other. You know, sometimes people have autoimmune issues, and then the root's really helpful. So, cool deal. Any other questions?
What about that purple berry called acai? I can't.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there are so many different ways that I hear people pronouncing that one. Acacia or acai. That one is very healthy, and I'm blanking on all the details on it. I know that it is a phenomenal antioxidant, and then it has a few other things. And
So immunity.
Probably. I'll have to double check on that one. It's not one that I've worked with super recently. It's rattling around the back of my head. If it pops up, I'll tell you. But good question. Play Stump the Doc. Point. All right. Let's see here. Let's move into the not meat of our lesson today. So, plant number 1. Anyone want to take a guess? Spoiler, if you can read my handwriting, you might figure it out.
Does it start with an A?
I have heard it.
Yeah.
Well, I see
What
them in
is
the
it?
store at Walmart.
This is plantain. So there are two plants that go by the name plantain. One of them is a banana. This is not the banana.
Okay, well, that's
All
what I
right.
see at Walmart.
Yep.
Banana.
No, I was confused the first time too. It's like, I can't imagine a banana coming off of this. It's kind of small. Well, the banana's underground. No, all right. So this is Plantago, is the Latin name, which is why they're like, oh, that sounds a lot like plantain. Let's call it plantain. There were some other reasons too. Matter of fact, actually, there were some pretty cool reasons that this was called Plantago and plantain. This is not native. This came over from Europe. When the European settlers came over, they brought seeds with them intentionally to go ahead and plant so that they could then later harvest. This was one that they used for thousands of years. This is used all over the place. This is very easy to use, and we'll get into that, both as food and medicine, and I've used that probably more than any other plants outside of the clinic, like just in my day-to-day life. It's like, I need something, grab that.
Is it native around our area?
It's not native, but it grows here like gangbusters.
But it grows?
Yep. And it's kind of welcome. It's naturalized. It's not a problem. It's not a pest. Unless you're trying to have a perfect lawn, in which case, good luck. Oklahoma. I swear, it's like anything you plant will get overrun. Everything else will grow wonderfully. But, so the European settlers, for the name, they came over and they brought over plants that were useful to them. I don't really know if they brought this one on purpose or not. It wouldn't surprise me if they did, but even if they didn't, see that little seed stalk up top? You can have several of those little diddle boingers coming off of a single plant, and you can get up to 20,000 seeds from one plant. And they've got this little static electricity thing going. So if you walk by them, you can get a whole bunch of them on your, especially if you have, you know, the old woolen clothes or linen clothes that's got more of the fibers coming off to kind of hold it. So the Native Americans, they saw these, who they called white people. They saw these white people come in and they saw them walk, and then they saw behind the white people their faithful plant as it all fell off with their clothes and grew like gangbusters. And so they said, everywhere the white man goes, his faithful plant follows. And so they named this, the Native Americans did, white man's footprint.
Wow.
So they could use this to tell where the white man had been. They kind of used it for scouting and tracking a little bit until it just went everywhere. And so, now, white man's footprint, put a little note in there, in your mind over there. How many of you guys have heard of something called plantar fasciitis?
Oh, yes.
Or plantar warts?
Yes.
Both of those are uncomfortable. So sorry for anyone who knows what those are.
Those are on the feet. Yeah.
Yeah, they're on the feet. So plantar fasciitis, the middle of your foot really hurts when you walk too much. There's something called fascia in your foot and lots of other places in your body, and it gets inflamed and irritated. So we call it itis, means inflammation. Plantar fasciitis, so the fascia is inflamed. Plantar warts, they're on the bottom. Plantar means bottom of the foot. Bottom of the foot. White man's footprint, we took that, and to honor that name, we used Latin to say Plantago, which means bottom of the foot, which is referencing white man's footprint. And that's why this is called Plantago. So Plantago kind of very loosely translates into footprint, or white man's footprint. So, now, this plant didn't need to be here long before the Native Americans quickly figured out what it was good for. They were very good herbalists, and still are. It's a little bit less cohesive and coherent of passed down lineage. My wife is Cherokee, by the way, of the knowledge of herbs that they used to have, but they still have a lot of knowledge there. And hopefully it gets preserved better now that it's starting to be appreciated, especially since it solves a lot of the problems that we're like, I don't know what to do. Well, they did, and some of them do. So they figured out it was good for a number of things. Some of what I say is going to come from them. Some of what I say is going to come from European backgrounds. So just so you know, this is not all just Native American knowledge. I'm now mixing things. This has a few different excellent medicinal qualities. Number one, it is vulnerary, or vulnerary if you want to pronounce it correctly, but I hate saying it that way. It makes my mouth feel like I tied a knot with my tongue. Means wound healing. So This, if you get a cut or a scrape or a burn or a sting or a bite, and you put some of this over it, you want to bruise up the leaf first. We're talking about the leaf. If you bruise the leaf up so it's nice and juicy, and it's no longer, all the cells are kind of broken up, so they're going to let their goodness come out onto you, and you put it on top of that little injury, you zoom in with a little microscope, and you can see your cells going like this. They have been given some tools that let the cell repair cycle happen more efficiently. And so they're able to do either division or just repair at a higher rate. And it is able to make so that you heal a lot faster. I was about to give an example, but I realized my example actually is talking about the second quality, astringent. That means tightening. Imagine, if you will, a kitchen sink with a mound of dishes up top. You take the mound of dishes off and put them to the side, and you see a sponge at the bottom that is a nasty gray. You can probably imagine that as soon as you poke that sponge, very nasty water comes out of it, and you really are looking forward to cleaning that sponge. So you try to delay the inevitable by running water over the top of the sponge, and it kind of dribbles some in and dribbles some out, but you're not really getting the job done until you pick it up and wring the sponge out, right? And then you put the new water in. Well, this is just a cleaning tip. No, okay, goes back to the body. In the body, when we have a sting or an infection, something that makes it swell in the area, it's got a bunch of nasty fluid in there. A lot of it's inflammation, and kind of like if you put salt somewhere, water likes to come where the salt is. If you put inflammation particles, you have fluid in the body that likes to go there, and so it gets swollen and tender, and the inflammation particles, you're trying to get rid of them with little white blood cells that are trying to clean it up, and they're having a hard time. If you put Plantago on top of that, let's say a wasp sting, then it wrings out the area. It's astringent, it's wringing, it's drying, it's moving, so it wrings out the area. And that makes so all the inflammation particles are not concentrated in one area, so it's easier for the body to clean them up. It also makes so that you don't have that pressure of the extra fluid right there anymore, so the tenderness goes down. It also binds up some of the nasty stuff, because astringent, actually what's happening is little proteins are going in, and they just grab stuff and hug it. And then that helps fluid movement as well, but that's really technical, so we'll leave it there.
Is what you're talking about the symptoms and what it does? Is it that plant?
This plant helps get rid of those symptoms.
That's not preparation H, is it? Reduce
Preparation
swelling?
H, well, I haven't heard of preparation H, but this does reduce swelling.
For hemorrhoids?
I do have another preparation. It's the bottoms up balm. But
Well, I heard that you use that on women use it on their face.
Under their eyes?
Yes, but
I've heard
because
that.
it helps with wrinkles.
Hmm?
Preparation H.
Interesting. I'll have to look at that one. It's not one I'm familiar with. But astringent might be a property that's in that one. It's tightening, and it does help with hemorrhoids. Astringent does. So, with a wasp sting, here's a fun little story really quick. I'm kind of changing a couple details in this story to make it clearer and faster. So it's close to what happened, and it's the same end result. Me and two nephews went out to do some harvesting. One of them went off the other direction, the other one stuck close to Uncle Taylor. All of us were very intelligent and managed to all get stung by wasps. It was fantastic. The one that was with me, we went ahead and harvested some plantain, because that day I was Uncle Doctor, and we went ahead and put it on top of the wasp stings, and it was like, oh, that's so much better. And then we went home later in the day, and we found out there was a third victim that we didn't know about, and he didn't get any plantain, and so Uncle Dr. Taylor gets to do an experiment on his nephews. Not intentionally, but so we got to see wasp sting with and without plantain. Much less painful, much less swollen. The redness, much less. The size, much less. The pain and tenderness, much less when using it. This is one I've also had someone else say that they had a golf ball sized reaction to a wasp sting, and that after applying it within 15 minutes, they could barely tell that they had been stung. So this is one that's pretty reliable, very helpful.
Would that work on mosquito bites?
Mosquito bites are another one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I won't guarantee that it gets rid of everything, but it reduces it.
Yeah.
So mosquito bites, burns, cuts, welts, little lacerations, wasp stings, very good for all of those. Has one more rather fantastic medicinal quality to the leaves. I'm going to tell a story for this one too. In Idaho, glorious Idaho, where they hide how wonderful they are by putting potatoes on the license plate and hoping no one knows what's there. I love Idaho. Keep it secret. There were two families that went out on a camping trip, and in Idaho you can really get away from everyone else. They hiked days into the wilderness away from everyone else. It's not like here where you walk and then you run into a new neighbor. It was like legitimately alone. And 3 days out, they started setting up the tents, they were listening to the dogs and the kids play, and they're having a good time. And then they heard a dog yelp. And they went out and they were just in time to see the tail of a rattlesnake disappear into tall grass. And the dog had been bit on its forepaw, whatever. Rattlesnake bites, that's usually lethal. They're 3 days out in the middle of nowhere. They have no cell reception. They have no way to get back fast enough for an antivenom to be of any use at all. Fortunately though, one of their party was an herbalist, and his name is Dr. Patrick Jones. He's also a veterinarian, but today he didn't use his veterinarian skills, he used his herbalist skills, which he usually blends shamelessly all the time anyway. And he had people go and harvest some echinacea root, some plantain leaf, and then a couple other things. And he mashed them all together, and then his veterinarian skills somehow let him get the dog to eat that. I don't know how that works, but he did. And then he also took it and he mashed it all up and made so that it was very mashed up and moist, and he put it over the injury. A few fascinating things about rattlesnake venom. Rattlesnake venom is made up of a lot of things called enzymes. Enzymes like to take something and break it. Occasionally an enzyme can take something and put it back together, but it just changes things. In rattlesnake venom, they're usually on the breaking side. They're trying to make so that the prey is no longer, well, alive. Some of those enzymes are, to give you examples, how many of you have heard of collagen?
Yes.
Collagen, that's in our skin. Well, there's an enzyme called collagen ACE. ACE is the short term to say break it down or enzyme. So collagen ACE is a collagen eating enzyme, collagenase, right? Well, collagen is in the dog's skin and there's an enzyme chewing it. There's also elastin in our skin and elastase in rattlesnake venom that chews it up. There's also hyaluronic acid in our skin and hyaluronidase in rattlesnake venom chewing it up. So all these different parts that are kind of like the mortar between our cells. So if you imagine a brick wall, all the bricks are our cells. All the things that I just listed are the mortar between our cells. You take mortar away from a brick wall and give it a gentle shove, what happens?
Collapses.
Rattlesnake bites, I don't recommend you look it up, but what they look like if they don't get treated quickly enough is all the skin sloughs off. It's not great, and you don't really survive that very easily. And some of it travels through your system, doing havoc everywhere else. In plantain, and echinacea root actually, but in plantain, please harvest echinacea responsibly. In plantain, there is anti-hyaluronidase, anti-collagenase, and anti-elastase, meaning they find the suckers that are chewing stuff up and they whack them and they make them stop. Plantago is an anti-venom. The next morning, that dog was still alive, and it kept its paw even, and it was able to continue living a normal life. Herbs can do some amazing things. Now, the moral of the story is that you should not fear rattlesnakes. You should let them bite you at any time. No, please be careful. So, it's not a universal anti-venom, but it is very handy. So, spiders also use venom, by the way. please go in and get checked. If it's brown recluse or whatever going on, you want to have a doctor looking at it. But if your doctor sends you back and says, you're not going to die, here's a pain ointment or whatever, and go deal with it, probably more kind than that, but you know what I mean. I had a friend 3 days after that exact experience, she had been hit right here. And she had a massive headache for 3 days straight, no relief. Very hard to sleep, very poor rest. And she had a new job and she was very fried. Is there anything you can do, Taylor? Because we were friends and I wasn't her doctor, because that's usually how that works. And I pulled out a salve that had Plantago in it. And I put some on there. 2 hours later, headache completely gone. There were probably still enzymes that were chewing and attacking stuff that were live 3 days later. So spider bites, very nice little antivenom there.
What about tick bites?
Tick bites, it will help with the bite. It won't cure any disease the tick is carrying. The disease in the tick, that goes into the bloodstream and you need some punchy stuff depending on what those are. Lyme is professional, it's like exceptional at hiding from a lot of things that want to kill it. So as soon as we're talking about tick-borne illness rather than a tick bite, illness, that's a whole nother ballgame. But
My
tick
brother
bite
got bit by
helps.
one, and he got alpha gal.
Ugh, yeah, that's not
It's not
a good one to get from
No.
it.
And so I just wondered if something like that would have helped the bite.
It wouldn't have prevented him from
Him from
getting
getting
the
that.
disease.
Yeah.
Most likely. It might help like a little, but you need to go get, frankly, that's one of the times where so my philosophy is use whatever works best with the least side effects. When it comes to tick bites that just barely happened, 1 day of a pharmaceutical antibiotic is what I prefer, because it's like, it's small enough, it hasn't hidden, it'll take care of it. 1 day of an antibiotic, we can reverse the damage that does to your liver and your gut pretty easily, and then you don't have alpha gal. And so I'm kind of the philosophy of use what works, not only natural. It's, we've developed some good tools and use them appropriately. If I'm in a car wreck, please don't take me to an herbalist. Okay?
To the
So,
emergency room.
Yes, and then an herbalist for recovery thereafter is fantastic, which plantain would help with, cellular replication. So, but excellent question, there's the answer.
I got a comment.
Please.
Honeysuckle. I've heard if you live in the country, you don't want a bunch of honeysuckle grown because it attracts deer, and deer can carry the
Ticks.
the Lyme tick, I think it is.
Red
But
Star.
are you going to tell me that there could be something good used in honeysuckle?
Honeysuckle, there are a number of different varieties. I don't remember, it's the Japanese one, I think, that's good for. Some of them are not edible, some of them, little parts of them are edible, and one of them is very tasty in a tea. I'd have to look at my notes of which one's which, so that I
The one
don't mess
that
you
is
up.
common is the yellow and white blossom.
Yeah, I'd have to check my notes. I know that one of the edible ones does grow around here, and the tea was magnificent, but I have to go and, I don't have everything stored up here. I have a nice
We
little
would
note
just
system.
go out, because it grows along a fence. Normally, the honeysuckle is fence line.
Yeah,
because
there's
they
more than
grow.
one variety that grows here.
Yeah, but we would just go out there and when they bloomed and pull that sweet stuff, stick it in our mouth and eat it.
Oh,
Yeah.
awesome.
And
Good
it was-
stuff.
it
Well,
was
the
good.
nectar-
It was good.
Nectar's really tasty, so,
What is it called?
Honeysuckle.
Honeysuckle.
Mhm.
Okay.
yeah.
And it's real calm.
Pretty sure the
But
name
it
came from
will,
how good the
you
nectar
don't wanna
tastes.
plant it, it will take over everything.
Yeah.
You can't get rid of it.
You can make hedge mazes out of that stuff.
Ugh.
All right,
I
so,
think I'm familiar with that plant. I've seen 1 or 2 stalks growing in my garden.
I would not be surprised at all. Let's go over how to make sure. So here's how to identify plantain. We got 2 different species that are on the same page. These narrow leaves, that's Plantago lanceolata, meaning lance-shaped leaf, lanceolata. Over here is my sorry attempt to get Plantago major with a big leaf, but it shriveled to half the size before I got pressed because I got distracted. And so that's what you got. But usually it has a bigger leaf. To identify plantain, it's a low-growing plant. Usually I encourage people when you're first learning how to identify it, wait for the diddleboinger, the seed stalk, to come up. You'll notice no leaves are attached to that seed stalk. That's your first thing. They're all coming from one point in the ground. Okay? No leaves on the seed stalk. And then the seed stalk looks like this. That's what it looks like. There you go. You can get more than one seed stalk coming out from one spot, that's fine. But they also can be green, and they have the flowers don't really look like flowers, they're just like little green bumps, and then they turn into this.
I have seen those. Growing
Yes.
up I saw those, but we didn't know what it was.
Yeah, it's all over. This actually grows on all continents besides maybe
Those are
Antarctica.
wide leaves.
So,
They're not narrow.
Wow.
yeah, so there's a narrow leaf version and a wide leaf version.
Oh, okay, figure.
Yeah.
And there will be
Yeah, that's a narrow leaf version. So there's the wide leaf up top. So Plantago, first you look for the seed stalk, that helps. Number 2, the leaves all grow out of the ground. Another term for ground level is basal. Basal, ground level or baseline. So this is basal growth. The leaves are coming out of the ground. I give you a term so that you remember like a word to call when it looks like that. It's not coming off the stalk, it's coming out of the ground. Now a rose, the flower, has petals coming off in all directions, right? In a circle? Well, a rosette has something going on in all directions. This has leaves going off in all directions. I tried to represent that as I put it on a 2-dimensional plane here. But it's a basal rosette.
I've heard that term used in skin cancer, but basal.
Yes, there are parts of the body where we call it basal because it's the base level of the connective tissue, and then that can grow some cancer. And so then they talk about it there too. But this is a plant, not cancer. Just but yes, they do use that term. So a basal rosette, that's what you're looking for. And the fun parts, in my opinion, you pick the leaf, and the little leaf stalk, I didn't get a whole lot of leaf stalk on here, sometimes they have more, that one's got a leaf stalk. When you pick the leaf stalk, you will feel it go snick, snick, snick. Because little fibers that are in there, if you look at the leaves, you can see the fibers, they're very noticeable, those parallel veins. I'll come back so you guys can see it too.
They look like veins.
Yeah, they've got veins.
Okay.
In the leaf stalk, you'll feel those veins snap as you pull it, and if you look down the leaf stalk, and you get a big enough one that you can see it, it looks exactly like celery. It's a U shape, and it has holes all along the U. That's where those fibers travel. And in the leaf, those fibers are so fat, just like in celery, it's so big that you can divide the celery and have the fibers still there, right? You can break the celery and have it like nunchucks. You can actually tear the leaf and have the fibers still there. And so you're looking for that celery-shaped petiole, fancy term for leaf stalk, and then the parallel veins. They're just all running next to each other, thick in the leaf. And on the underside of the leaf, it looks like a washboard, all those veins sticking out in bumps. So you put all that together, you have Plantago. That's plantain. Once it is mature with the seed stalk, not really any other lookalikes, especially for the broadleaf one that I recommend you start with. The lance leaf one, you can get confused with a number of other plants, sort of. But once you got the seed stalk, you're pretty safe. If it's very young and doesn't have a seed stalk, there's so many things look like, oh yeah, it's got leaves that come off in a circle and they're sort of bumpy, I guess, and it's too young. Just wait till it gets older. Don't harvest the young ones until you really know what you're doing. So wait for the seed stalk. You won't have to wait long. It goes pretty fast, and it's one that matures multiple times through the year. And
So are you using the leaves of the plantain or the seeds?
Good question. Everything we've talked about thus far, here I'll show future you on YouTube. Everything we've talked about thus far is the leaves.
The leaves.
The seeds do have a use though, and we'll touch on that. And then we've had a lot of fun with plantain. The seeds are everybody's favorite medicinal action, laxative. Yeah,
Really?
all right. So,
Wow.
Metamucil, the active ingredient in that
Good colon.
is this.
Oh, yeah.
It's technically a very closely related sister plant, but it's the same thing. So that is Metamucil up top. So, you know, you can slip that into your brother-in-law's coffee anytime. So, that is Plantago, and very safe plant. This is one you can feed to kids. They called it a pot herb because people would just throw it in their pot. Fair warning, the older the leaves, the more bitter. Matter of fact, little fun story, I guess everything's Plantago today, we're telling you all the Plantago stories. So my nephew, a different nephew than the previous story, but same family, was sent out to go gather a bunch of Plantago leaves because I had just taught about it and they were trying to eat healthier and succeeding. And he brought in a bunch, but he was not very happy about this chore, and so he picked all the biggest leaves, so he didn't have to do it very long. So he brought in all these ginormous leaves, because they're on a homestead, so it grows. And those were what were served. And all the kids, they had spinach and kale and plantain on their plate, and they were like, oh. And the plantain was just beyond them, because bigger is bitterer, right? And then Mom said some magic words. All right, if you'll eat the spinach and the kale, you don't have to eat the plantain. All of a sudden, everybody's favorite food, spinach and kale, demolished. So if you want to know how to make kids enjoy spinach and kale, plantain has this mysterious effect on them. So pick the smaller leaves unless you're looking to have some fun. Or if you have acquired the taste of bitter, which some cultures consider just another flavor to enjoy, to a degree. I like some bitter myself, actually.
So you just eat the plants like lettuce or salad or something?
You can do a number of things. Have any of you heard of kale chips? All those
Yes,
recipes?
yes.
Make the same thing with this.
Oh,
Really good.
wow.
That's the way to make it tasty. Or you can just take the leaf, rub it down, eat it. Take the leaf, put it in a salad. I wouldn't make this the main leaf in your salad. I'd make it an accent if you're going for flavor. If you're going for, I need to get something in me and I don't care how it tastes, I mean, go for it. That's how I eat.
Okay, before I have to leave early, tell me what that leaf is gonna do for my body. What's the good thing it does?
It helps increase wound healing, and it also helps reduce inflammation, and it also helps with laxative if you use the seeds.
Laxative. Okay.
Just the seeds, though.
So
I mean,
take
actually,
that
the leaf,
in place
just
of
the.
the colon cleanse tablets I'm taking. All right.
Yeah. So it's got some good stuff.
Okay. Thank you.
Also anti-venom. All right, we'll go through the other two a little faster, I think, but we were having so much fun with plantain. So, any questions on Plantago?
One quick one. So the broadleaf versus the
Lance,
lance leaf, is there a difference in the medicinal qualities?
I love that question. The answer is technically yes, but it is so subtle that really you just use either one. One of them's slightly better here, one of them's slightly better there, and frankly, even I always forget which one it is because it's like a 10% difference.
Okay.
So, good question though. All right. This is not in my handwriting, so I have to actually cover it up. Otherwise, people just know the answer because you can read it. Anyone want to take a guess on what this is? Curly dock.
Curly dog.
This is yellow dock, curly dock, or Rumex crispus.
We ate that dog growing up.
Yeah, this is good
Yes.
stuff. Roman soldiers, a couple thousand years ago, when they were thirsty in the field, as near as we can tell, everything's a little sketchy in history when you get that far back, but as near as we can tell, they would get back up. They would pick some of these leaves as they were marching to get rid of thirst. And the reason is these are kind of sour, a little bit of sourness in them a lot of times. This is a plant that can vary, as in change quite a bit. And so some of them are less sour, some of them are more. Some of the leaves are straight, some of them are very floppy and curly with undulating margins. Like That's why it's called curly dock, is usually it's got that going on. But Roman soldiers would eat it, and they would get some of that sourness that made the thirst go down. And Native Americans would use a different part. Actually, they would use the leaves as well. But also, you've seen all those rust-colored seed heads with all the seeds on them on the side of the road, maybe. They turn iron red, and they're called iron weeds by some people. And you don't let sheep eat them because they get too much iron and it's not good for them. Well, that's curly dock. You can see the rust seed. This is once it goes to seed, into the air. That's where it is right now.
Well, it's kind of tall, doesn't it?
Yeah, it gets a decent height. It can get up to here, to here, something like that.
That's it, the 4 seed?
Yep, that's it. So the reason that it turns that rust red color is because there actually is iron in the plant. And so this is one, all the seed, everything above ground is edible. And the seeds can be ground up into a flour, and that's just what the Native Americans would do, is they grind it up and they make little seed cakes or ground up flour cakes of curly dock flour. And it has some iron in there, and so it helps supplement your iron intake a little bit, which is sometimes helpful, especially if you're vegetarian or vegan and looking for plant sources. So have some vitamin C at the same time, it'll help more. Which this has, by the way, vitamin C. So there you go. That's really quick on what it is. Above ground, it's good for edibility. There's some other cool stuff that we can talk about another time, but I want to make sure that we at least hit the highlights of these other guys. We had so
I'm
much
afraid
fun.
this hour is gonna go by too fast.
So the root, however, is where we find the medicine. So above ground is food, below ground is medicine. And I have used this root to good effect myself. Native Americans would use it for cleansing the blood, which usually when you hear that, there's a herbalist term called alterative, which means to alter the blood towards a state of health. And it's kind of a whooshy term, like, what is that? How? What do you mean, like, make blood healthy? You know, it's a little older, so they were just kind of saying, this is what it seems to do. So, but in modern scientific terms, we have analyzed the compounds of the root. And we have found a compound called crispanic acid, one among many that are in the root, but that one has a strong yellow color. If you take the root and you cut it and you open it, sometimes you have a pale root, but other times you have a little dot of yellow, and sometimes the entire thing is vibrant yellow. It goes anywhere between all of that. Crispanic acid is yellow, so you can actually see it. That acid is extremely healthy for the liver and the skin. It helps the liver detoxify and get rid of all the garbage that we keep throwing at it every day. And it helps it process it and package it so that then it can go out in our stool and be moved away, provided we eat fiber. So here's your plug, make sure you eat fiber, because otherwise you put the garbage out and then no garbage truck comes, and so then what does your body do? It brings it back in and reabsorbs it all. And that's one of the main reasons everyone has a cholesterol problem. Not the only reason.
Really?
Yeah.
That has to do with cholesterol, huh?
Yep. That's one of the main, if not the main way that cholesterol is supposed to be removed from the body, is fiber binds up a whole bunch of stuff and takes it out of the body. No fiber, you reabsorb all of it. Cholesterol is one of them. This helps the liver process it and put a whole bunch of stuff out. If you eat the seeds, then you get the fiber too. So there you go.
Well, I want to ask you a question about the roots of them. Do they grow deep in the ground? Are the roots very big, or?
So the roots get about yay thick, so 1/4 inch to 1 inch thick. They're tap roots, which means that they tend to be.
They're deep then.
They tend to go deeper, but they're thicker up top and taper off. And so if you use one of those narrow shovels that are, gardening shovels,
Yes.
you'll get a good portion, and that's enough. And frankly, you don't need a lot of roots to take care of yourself. If you're trying to take care of 40 people, then yes, you need a decent amount. But if you're trying to just take care of yourself, as long as that root has some yellow in it, this is one where you can, with your eyeballs, see the medicinal potency of the plant you harvested. Is it yellow? Is it not? Crispanic acid is visible, which I think it's so cool. Herbalists for hundreds of years, I don't know how early they said this specific thing, but I would be very surprised if it wasn't for hundreds of years. Certainly it was before the chromatography told us. They said how yellow it is how strong it is. And they just knew that because they use it all the time. So it's kind of like, this chili pepper is spicy. How do you know? Because I tasted it all the time. You know, hands-on knowledge is worth a lot. You don't need a lab value for everything. So it's really good for the liver detox. It's also really good for the skin. I'll tell a quick story and then we'll move to the last plant. I had a patient come in. I've had more than one patient come in. Acne, skin. There's lots of different causes of acne, more than one, but one of the common ones is liver not processing hormones very well. This helps the liver process the hormones. I usually combine it with some other things so it works better, but in 1 week of that special formula that I put together, I've had people come in who had pretty significant acne, kind of covered down the back and then pretty significant up top. Had it reduced, they've had that for years. Had it reduced by 60% in 1 week.
Wow, that's
And then there are other people who come in with more minor outbreaks, gone in 1 week. Does it work for everybody? No, but it's a pretty good shot. So, and that's 1 week. This is also laxative, so that's part of it. It moves the stuff out. That's actually a good thing. So, lots of cool stuff here. How to identify it? You look for those seed stalks we already talked about. I'm going to give you a zoom up right here on the seed. Imagine a dolphin.
Oh, wow.
The dolphin has 2 fins that come out like this and one that comes out top, right? And then the central part is the dolphin. This seed has a little egg, a little seed in the center, and 3 fins coming off like that. So look for the fins.
Yeah, that's a different kind of seed than you normally see.
So, yeah, it is.
It would catch our attention, I think.
So if you have a stalk that looks rust red and it's seed and it's dried and all that kind of stuff, then you can identify it pretty well. You usually want to harvest the root before it goes to that part because now it's kind of like, I've put all my energy into my seeds, but it'll help you start identifying the plant. The leaves, I encourage you to take a picture of this. They're frilly. Okay, one thing for the leaves really fast. What, 5 minutes for the last plant? It's a basal rosette. And now you guys have had my nerdiness inflicted upon you, so you know what that means. Mwah, chef's kiss. That was towards the wall. No one hit me. But if you follow the leaf stalk down into the ground, you're going to feel this wrap around it. And it's going to be very slick. And it's plants, so it's fine. It's slimy. That's okay. And you pull it up, and this wrap is right there. That wrap is called an ochrea, and it's around every leaf stalk's base. And that means that it is definitely in the Rumex genus, which means it's one of the very closely related plants, and none of those are toxic, to my knowledge. Now, you always want to identify properly before you use it, but it at least can give you a little bit of a confidence boost. Okay? So there you go. Oh, this one we must. All right. You're all my hostages. And then for future you, here's Curly Doc. And that's what you get. All right. This last one, winged sumac. This is a hidden gem. This, so many people think it's poisonous. It's not. There is a poisonous one, but not this one. We'll talk about it. All around the Mediterranean Sea, over near Greece and that area, there is a flavor blend called za'atar. It's a spice blend. And anytime you have Mediterranean food, there's like an 80% chance that seasoning is in there, and it's delicious. One of my favorite. I just love it. We'll leave it at that. It's amazing. Apparently, I couldn't leave it at that. But one of the secret spices that goes in there, frankly, every Mediterranean mother has her own secret recipe for za'atar, but one of the things that's pretty well always in there is sumac spice. This has a lemony zing with a little bit just of a fruity current that goes underneath that blends well with it, not disrupting the flavor. Anything you would use lemon pepper in, this would be better. And this is the one that my sister-in-law down in Texas keeps making sure that none of you ever see any of from me. So, za'atar, sumac is the star spice in there. So the spice comes from the berries. Technically, their drupes, like cherries, have pits. These have pits, okay? The way that you would identify this, I guess I'm skipping ahead, stay in sequence. Nope. The way that you identify this, it's called winged sumac. Look along that middle stem. It has little wings along the middle
But
stem.
it also has red on the leaves, don't it?
Yeah, this is
Or-
true. Yeah. Even when it's not dried, there are red spots on the leaf typically. And so that'll help you as well. Here's a green picture, and you'll notice that there are some red spots. That's not what the arrows are pointing to, they're pointing to the wings.
Mm.
You'll see red spots on the leaves.
Oh, okay.
And so underneath the chlorophyll green, there's always red there, but the green outpowers it until it dries, and then the red's what's left. So if you find those wings, that's a good start. If you find the berry clusters that look like little pyramids coming off the terminal part of the branch, that's really good. Once you're pretty sure that you have the right plant and you have your secondary source, and don't just take Dr. Goodwin's thing all by itself, but even though I know what I'm doing, it's just, safety. If you take the berry and you roll it between your fingers, and then you lift your finger,
Sour.
it's sour, unless it recently rained and washed all the healthy acids off the surface for a few days and then they regrow out. But acetic, citric, and not chrysofanic acid, that's you. Acetic, citric, and some other acid that's really phenolic, maybe. No. Anyway, usually I get the last acid at the end of the thing, but yeah, so there's lots of acids in there. This is really good for blood sugar.
Oh, it is.
Yes, it is. It's good for insulin resistance. It makes so that your insulin works better. And it's a good anti-inflammatory. And so I call it Diabetic's Delight, because it's also delicious. And so this is one that you can make a nice tea out of. And you can make sumac lemonade. You take that seed stock, you pretend that it's completely clean, and then you dip it into your water bottle and leave it there for 10 minutes. And then you pull it out and you have a nice gently flavored lemonade. Or you take it home, toss it in the blender. The seeds are edible, but you don't want to chew on them, they'll break your teeth. But any of the seeds that are reduced to powder, that's fine. Go ahead and be happy. Any of them that aren't reduced to powder, you're going to pour it through a sieve, all the red powder and the ground up seeds. Go through, all the ones that aren't ground up stay out. Those non-ground up seeds, I use those to make my lemonade, much stronger.
Oh.
And so you can also just crush everything and then put that in to make the lemonade too. But that remainder, that's sumac spice, all the red stuff that went through. You do need to dry it, and there's a few other techniques in there that are helpful, but that's the gist. Insulin, blood sugar, inflammation, delicious. So, grows everywhere. Poison sumac, last note, and then we'll close. Within 5 minutes, good job. Poison sumac is a look-alike if you're colorblind, I guess, or more than that. It has white berries, okay? It has white
Big
berries.
difference.
So if the berries look like they're really cold, don't harvest them, okay? If they're white, don't harvest. Matter of fact, in general, that's a great rule of thumb. I think there's only like 3 berries in the world, don't quote me on that, that are white and edible. Almost all white berries are poisonous, and strongly so. The other thing is, if you want to find poison sumac, you usually have to put your wellies on, and then go out into a bog, step off, 500 feet before you finally find its environment where the witch probably lives too, and then you finally find poison sumac right next to her hut, I'm sure. But it's not really easy to come across. So it likes living in bogs, and it has white berries, and the leaves look different too. But it's called sumac. I haven't put my wellies on to make sure.
Good luck with that.
So I wouldn't be surprised if it did, but I'm also not really worried about it.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't look the same. And the part you use is the berries, and that's the part that looks very different. So,
Very.
all right, we're gonna go ahead and leave that part I'm gonna close with a few of the cool events we have coming up. So I already told you this is a monthly event, every second Wednesday at 5:30, free. Please come back, we'll have more plants and more fun. There are a few other events. I have a plant walk that I am offering, where we go and see these in their, modus operandi, in their habitat. And that is coming up on not this Saturday, but the Saturday following, so 4th Saturday of this month, whatever number that is, whatever day that is. And that's at 9:30 down in Kansas, Little Kansas. That one is a paid event, but it's not too much, and you can sign up on my website, which is on the card, or there's a QR code that you can just boop to get you in right back there. So that one, we're going to go over plants that grow in disturbed areas. We're actually going to talk about sumac. You'll get to see it. We'll talk about plantain. You'll get to see it. Curly dock is actually there too. Go figure. You'll get to see it. Also a bunch of these other ones. Not everything, but a good number of them. So that's really cool. That's one event coming up. Another event is I have opened a second cohort of my Foundations of Home Herbalism course. This course teaches you how to be a home herbalist, how to think like an herbalist, and so that it's not just a bunch of plants that are like, oh, this is good for cold sores. Where's my cold sore plant? But you know how to categorize, and even if there's plants that have never been used for this that you've read about anywhere, you'll know this will help that because of these reasons that I now understand. It makes you think like an herbalist and put things together. And so that class is actually starting this Saturday. I'm considering delaying it a month since I didn't really get the word out very well. If you're interested in that, talk to me after I finish jabbering up here. Last two things, or two other events. One of them, oh yeah, I'm a doctor. I have an office. If you're interested in natural health and optimum health, or taking care of a health issue that isn't really responding as well as you'd like in other ways, I have an office. And I do a free consult for 15 minutes so we can get to know you, ask whatever questions, see if it's a good match. Doctor, where do you think you can take me? Is it far enough that it's a good match for you? You get to find out before you spend a dime. That way you know what's going on, especially since most people don't even know how to pronounce naturopath. I figure that's fair. So, and then I think that actually is all the events. There'll be one that I have in 10 minutes. But there we go. Thank you guys for coming today.
Oh,
Thank you.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I really enjoyed it. Is there a difference between what you do and holistic medicine